We welcome you to a very interesting interview today of data integrity for our PQX homepage. And we welcome to this interview Christoph Jansen as a GMP expert from Medler Toledo. And hello to our interview partner as well, Ian Scott-Mance, who is a digital transformance manager today. Happy to have you here, and I'm going to switch out my camera now and listen to this very interesting interview.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Miriam, and very much welcome to you, Christopher. It's an extremely interesting topic. So I've done a little bit of research, and the term data integrity was defined 26 years ago by the FDA. Now that's a long time ago. So if you could please just remind us what that actual definition is, and add, has anything really changed in this interpretation over the last 26 years?
Yes, actually, there are a lot of things that have changed since it was introduced. It was in 1995 where the FDA added the term data integrity into their glossary. And the definition was just simple. It said is the extent to which all data are complete, consistent, and accurate. In 2015, the MHRA, that is the British version of the FDA, has added that this has to apply throughout the life cycle of your data, which is a kind of common sense that it has to be like that. Due to the fact that there were a lot of issues in the pharmaceutical industries, the regulations have changed, but more than that, the interpretation of regulations have changed quite a lot. The focus has moved always to a couple of other things. And since then, I think the biggest change that has been applied was the pressure for going electronic with your data. I think this is the biggest change in the last couple of years. So this asks for technical controls to avoid a lot of things that have been discovered in some of the pharmaceutical industries. So there was put a lot of focus on providing technical controls to avoid doing things that have been done.
That's a very interesting point you bring up about how this has changed and gone into the digital space. As you know, I do a lot of digital stuff. So has this led to any misconceptions or misinterpretations, this transition towards digital? I mean, that's something that's one of the things that's really interesting in us these days.
Yeah, actually, it has. I mean, you just have to look at the number of FDA warning letters that describe issues with digital misbehavior of data. And that goes from bad behavior of personnel to technical setups that just do not provide enough technical controls. And due to that, of course, the interpretation of the rules, as I mentioned before, permanently changed. And I mean, we as an instrument supplier often ask ourselves, how can we dare to tell the pharmaceutical industries how to interpret the rules? But our perception that pharma companies always know what they're doing is contradicted by the number of warning letters, where you see people make a lot of mistakes. And the reason for this might be that they're not reading or not understanding the requirements. And what I also quite often observe, that QA has a different understanding of what has to be done, maybe the closest to what's really required, but then they have lab managers, QC managers, and lab technicians who have a different view. So to my experience, pharmaceutical industries are not speaking always in one voice, if you can say that.
Yes, you can certainly say that. Thanks for that explanation. I mean, as we've been talking, we've been bringing up the subject of the FDA quite a lot. We said at the beginning that they made the first definition of this 26 years ago. So we are a global village these days. And so, I mean, what's the consequences for other countries? I mean, it's the FDA, it's the US, okay, they're the biggest, but I mean, it's for other countries, it's like, so what? It's the US. What are those implications? You did mention the British version of the FDA. Are these rules accepted everywhere?
Well, that is actually a very good question. We sometimes, I mean, our company has a global setup, so we provide our solutions throughout the whole globe. And sometimes we get concerns by countries such as China, for instance, or India, where our customers say, we don't need to follow the FDA rules, we follow our own regulations. But actually, the most FDA warning letters are issued to China and India. And this not because they are always bad or worse than other countries. It's just they make 80% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients in the whole world. So, and of course, then you always get there, you would expect that you get the most findings there as well. And the reason why they produce so many active pharmaceutical ingredients for the rest of the world is because they want to make business with the rest of the world. And the regulations you have to follow are not dependent on where you produce the product, but what is the destination of your final product. So if you produce for the US, you have to follow the US rules. If you produce for Europe, you have to follow the European rules. And if you think there is a big difference in the regulations and how this is interpreted, the differences in the regulations are not as big as one could think.
So sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
So what we're saying really is that the FDA actually sort of owned that space and they actually benchmark. They can be used as the benchmark. Their interpretation and their rules are very much a benchmark for the rest of the world.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, the rest of the world would probably deny it, say we don't copy from the FDA. But if you look at the name of the agency in China, it's called the Chinese FDA. If you look at some of the definitions in other regulations, you see that they kind of are very similar. And I think this is actually the best thing that can happen. First of all, the rules are made according to more or less common sense. Because what does the rules say? You have to have good data. They have to be correct, and you need to have evidence who did what and when. You need to provide evidence that you followed certain SOPs, so you standardize your processes. And so on and so forth. So there is a lot of common sense involved, and also if you look at from the cost base for the pharmaceutical companies, if they want to sell their products into various countries, if they have to make the documentation for each country they export their goods for, the cost would explode. So having a kind of a common regulation package to follow also reduces cost for the companies. Does that answer the question?
That absolutely. Thank you very much. You did bring up a point as well about processes, and while I was looking at the subject, a mnemonic, a LOCA, always kept popping up, which is about the processes behind how data integrity is actually implemented. This might be quite a long question, actually, but would you be able to give us a short sort of run over of that mnemonic and what it actually means?
I'm not sure if I understood the question right.
A LOCA is a
Alcoa.
mnemonic.
Alcoa,
Yes.
sorry.
Sorry, my pronunciation, my fault. But please carry on.
Yeah, the Alcoa principle, that's kind of the 10 commandments of data integrity, as also no, it is Alcoa is these are the 10 commandments from GMP, good manufacturing practice, and all the content of this Alcoa is absolutely common sense. Each letter in this Alcoa means something. So A stands for attributable. So you need to know who did what and when. So date and timestamp and user is important. Then you have L for legible. So you have to be able to read the data throughout the life cycle, because this is your evidence that your product is safe, actually. And the life cycle means how long is your product available on the market or has impact on patient safety. Here are the regulations a little bit different from country to country, but well, you could summarize it. It is a long time where how long data have to be available. That was legible. Alcoa. C, contemporaneous. You have to write it at the time to record your lab result at the time when it was produced. So there must be no time gap between observing or documenting it. Oh, no, it's from making the result and documenting it. So that has to be done immediately. And on proper media. So you might not write in the inside of your hand or in your lab coat, etc. Again, common sense. Then original. You only need one original to avoid also confusion, and or a certified copy. And then you have the last R. A stands for attributable. Sorry, for accurate. Data need to be accurate. And who would debate that? Of course they have to be. But accurate does not only mean that the results are correct, but it means the way how you document it has also to be correct. And what can be often seen as a violation of this is when people make a mistake. They do not follow a certain procedure to correct values. The correct way of doing this is to strike out the wrong value that you have noted down, and so that is still readable. Do not use white correction fluid, and then write the correct value, for instance, on top of it. Add a date, sign it, and maybe give a comment about, why this mistake was done. And then you're done. This is with paper records, but with electronic records, you obviously don't have so many issues with that.
Thanks
That's
very much for that.
Common sense.
Well, you say that's all that for those that know how to do it, I find that a lot of times very simple. That's what we're here today to explain to people. So we talked a lot about the pharma industry as well. And as we know, sort of data transformation and the struggles that the pharma industry went through 10 to 5 years ago, the food industry are catching up with their digitalization efforts, and data integrity is going to be a big thing. So I know one of the main differences between the pharma and the food industry is going to be cost, but do you see any other differences between implementations with what the pharma industry has done and what the food industry is going to be expected to do in the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, there's one observation that is it was observed many years ago, that food industries follows pharma industries maybe with a distance of 10 years. Nowadays, people say it's about 5 years until the food industry will be where the pharma industries is today. Part of the reasons for this is what I mentioned before. The pharma regulations are common sense. So I've never seen also a food company who says, I don't care about the quality of my quality results. So they need a lot of these data integrity rules, even if they name it maybe differently. So they need correct results. They need to have traceability and all these kind of things. The major difference between pharma and food industries, in my view, is that the consequences for deviations from the original process are not as big. But if you look back into some of the last food scandals we had, we see the food industries is also developing tools, regulations to regain consumer trust. So for pharma industries, it is patient safety. For the food industries, I would say the consumer trust is the driver for more data integrity.
Yes, I'd agree with you fully, and actually we see also the FDA playing quite a leading role in this new food transformation. So, I mean, I see we're getting near to the end of our time together. It's been a riveting conversation. So I'm now going to put you on the spot, Christoph, and I'm now going to ask that really important question. If you could give 30 seconds of advice to all of our viewers and listeners, what would that be? Go.
Read the documentation, try to understand it. If you do not understand it, seek for advice. It is very crucial that you understand the requirements. To my experience, ask QA, because they know a lot better what is needed, and always find a compromise between their view of things and how you can, let's say, convert this into practical action items. Change your processes if needed.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anything I've learned a lot today? It's been great listening to you. It's been really informative. Is there anything else that you would like to add to anyone listening that might be of importance? Something, well, we don't know what we don't know, and you might know.
Yeah.
And if you've got any words of wisdom along those lines.
No words of wisdom. And actually, the wisdom is not mine. I learned a lot from other people here and that, because I followed the advice. When I read the documents first, I not being in the pharmaceutical industries, I need help from people who have a lot more experience. And the person I learned most from is a gentleman called Bob McDowell. He's written millions of books about the topic and scientific papers. But my piece of advice from my experience in this field would be consider going electronic with your data. Electronic data are a lot less error prone. We know paper is very error prone. If you think you understand paper a lot better, that might be an illusion. Finding records after 10, 20, 30 years can be a bit of a pain for pharma industries, but also for food industries. You will, to increase the quality of paper data, you will need a second person review. With electronic data, you don't need that. The documentation effort for paper records is amazing compared to electronic records. So it has a lot of regulatory benefits going electronic, but also a lot of business benefits. It makes your process leaner, more efficient.
Oh, Christoph, before we actually finish there, we've talked a lot about digital, especially in your wrap up. So I'm actually going to prolong this interview now, a bit unexpected. 21 CFR Part 11. That's something that's always brought into the conversation when we're talking digital data and data integrity. I think we've not discussed it in the previous parts of the interview, but I think it would be a good topic just to hear a few words on.
Well, nowadays everybody's talking about 21 CFR Part 11. And I think there is a little misconception on both ends, on the pharma industries, but also on our supplier end of the discussion. Today, there is kind of the perception that data integrity and 21 CFR Part 11 is the same. It is not. You still are able and allowed to make recordings on paper, and they still can fulfill the requirements of data integrity. 21 CFR Part 11 is a regulation for electronic records and electronic signatures. It's been around for about 20 years or so, and pushes or gives guidelines for pharmaceutical industries to go electronic with their data and defines the requirements for that. Although paper is still allowed, there is also a lot of regulatory pressure from all agencies to go electronic with their data for various reasons. They do not have the business benefits in their focus, but the ability to enforce certain behavior with technical controls. And there is one document, for instance, from the WHO that says clearly the replacement of hybrid systems, that is the combination of paper and electronic records, the replacement of hybrid systems should be a priority. This is very clear regulatory pressure towards going electronic. And if we look at last year's warning letters, we see they increase the pressure. They increase the pressure for proper setups. They increase the pressure on instruments that have been kind of excluded in the company's digitalization path. So nowadays you find warning letters where pharmaceutical companies are pushed to also connect things like balances, pH meters, etc. So the small instruments to electronic records. Strong trend.
Thank you very much for that final word on that. So I guess from the beginning going through to the end, we're going go digital. It's definitely the way forward. I've got nothing to add. I've learned a lot as we've been speaking. So I think I'll hand back to Miriam to close up this session. Thank you once again. Thank you very, very much, Christoph and Miriam, for the opportunity to have this discussion. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Christoph. It was a very, very interesting and valuable interview today. And I can totally agree with you, Ian. I learned a lot, especially to your unexpected last question. So thank you for that again. And hopefully we will have another interview, maybe to another topic, or go more into the detail. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Been a pleasure. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.